Please join me in welcoming James Lerud. Have fun.
All right, sound is good. It's good to see everybody here. I had the pleasure of speaking last year, and this year everything has grown, so hats off to the ATT team. I can't believe what you get away with, like all this stuff, and it's amazing. It's truly amazing. So for me, the 2.0 really means let's take some risks and go twice as big this year, maybe a logarithmic scale. Let's really blow this up, because I kind of represent that salty guy that that a lot of the keynote speakers were talking about. I'm the guy who's been doing this for a long time with my head in the trenches, and so I decided, how do I talk about that? How can I be critical about myself? And you see the Dungeons and Dragons reference here, so I'm going to kind of turn it into a little bit of a game. It's a crazy idea, but I think that security needs crazy ideas, so don't be afraid of trying something crazy sometimes. Quick disclaimer before I start. All right. I think I'm a level 8 security guy now. If I put on the cape, it might get... Oh, hold on. Do you not believe me? I got a medal for cybersecurity excellence. All right, so now that my credibility is established, don't call me Bobo the cyber clown, because Gacy ruined that. So what am I going to do? Well, my perspective on things is maybe a little bit different than your CTI folks. I have been under the surface of the ocean, metaphorically. I'm not an actual diver, looking for treasure. And every once in a while I come up and go, whoa, everything's changed. Oof, let me get my lung capacity up. I'm going to dive back down and look for some more. And so that makes for a socially awkward weirdo who's now talking to you with wearing a wig, but Halloween is like, what, tomorrow? So I'm allowed to do this, I think. Sorry, MITRE, I didn't run this by you exactly. So who is security guy? Well, security guy likes to think that he's a James Bond, Sean Connery type guy who's always smooth and knows what to do in an emergency situation, but he backs it up with some math. He does Sudoku in his free time. You got some analog measures. That's okay, I got some tools for that. I can process analog and digital. And when I take my day off, I'm gonna go camp in my tetrahedron tiny house. You can come to me there and ask me questions. But how do I actually see myself? Like real James, how do I see myself? Well, I'm like Mr. Bean sometimes. I'm like driving the car and like disaster is happening everywhere around me, and like somehow stuff is working out. And it's almost like a fear. Maybe some people share this in common. I don't know. I get up on top of that power line, and you know what I do? I fix that little bit, and then I climb down the ladder. I'm like, yep, this is sustainable. My favorite really here is the I fixed it part, where everything's burning down around you. So what does this have to do with ATT&CK? Well, in perspective and communication and talking to people. That's what I like about ATT&CK, honestly, is that it gives you something to start with for a guy like me to talk to a person who's interested in threat intel. But I can tell you I've seen the wheel reinvented many, many times. So what happened to me a couple years ago? Well, I moved to a farm. That was by choice. This is like a weird first world problem where I decided I love animals. I'm not like producing artisan cheese or anything, but gives me an excuse. And one thing that went along with that maybe you know about, maybe you don't. This is going to sound like I live in a shack, but I don't, I swear. I have HughesNet. I don't know if you're familiar with satellite internet, but the modern web is not really built for loading websites at 2,000 millisecond latencies. My like Overwatch team, oh sorry, not Overwatch. I don't play that game, but it is a good example. So I really have this theory about myself, and that is that I'm at this point where I started my career with a whole lot of ambition, and as time gets on, I go weirder and weirder and saltier, and all of a sudden, I'm looking at my career and I'm going, oh, maybe I'm past the point where I can actually like do everything myself. Maybe I am well on my way to being a hermit farmer. I did buy a farm. So as I'm putting together this presentation to try to convince you of something in 10 minutes, this is what I'm doing. I'm using this awesome tool, frankly, called Beautiful AI. It only loads in Chrome because apparently Firefox isn't a modern browser. But guess what? It loads on HughesNet, so kudos to those guys. And as I'm waiting for my stock imagery to load, this is the kind of stuff I'm doing. I'm looking at the JavaScript that's going on. And the things that I used to do, hey, I'm looking for malicious stuff there. So I'm like, oh, that string looks like base64 encoding or not encoding, or that's a hash, or that's whatever. And it's like kind of this squirrel ADD mentality, because when you fight fires for like 15 years, you get dropped into different situations, but it's almost instinct to do this stuff. But later, what am I gonna do? Well, have you ever dug through like your old screen capture folders? That's a selfie of me in VR, like, I don't know, like 5 years ago or something, so. But I do have some kind of audience. So if you're sitting here at home and you're like, I kind of get what this guy's talking about, there's dozens of us. And you know, this came up on a tweet, and I'm like, oh, language makes us gods. And I'm always worried about getting taken out of context to the point where I do markups and disclaimers and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes you just got to speak your mind on things. And you have the audience, I guess is the point I'm making. It's 3.2 million subscribers to MITRE. Is that what that number means? It's not PewDiePie numbers, but you know, maybe they could hire PewDiePie. I don't know. So what is the point of my talk, really? What does any of this have to do with attack? Well, I'm using the Chewbacca defense. I'm saying like, hey, things are complicated, therefore it's not my fault that things are going wrong. Have you ever seen that episode? If you haven't, I'm sorry. But really, that's the kind of thing that happens to you over time as a super technical, self-proclaimed technical firefighter is you make excuses. People talk about cognitive bias. It's a kind of cognitive bias. You see yourself as something else and you say, it's not my fault because things are complicated. For really though, what's the point? Well, when you ask me about the MITRE attack charts and cyber heat maps and things, this isn't new. It's not. Like, if you want to pay me money, my motivation is going to light that thing up green. I'm going to do it. Even if I trick myself into doing it, I'm going to do it. And so here, I regularly just Google stuff to see what it means to regular people. I mean, that's like a really powerful tool, to be honest. Try the Wayback Machine sometimes for some perspective. So I Googled like cybersecurity heat map. And this is what came up. I don't think it has anything to do with attack. The bottom one is a blog post from 2010 defending the risk matrix. I mean, so this isn't a new conversation that I'm having. People spin forever. So again, this is how people think of algorithms. I looked up algorithm on stock photo, which is awesome. But this is what comes up. People still think about the Matrix. That movie came out in 1999. I mean, I think of algorithms completely differently than you might, is my point. So maybe try role-playing as a character. Roll a dice and say, you know, critical strike, I hit you with this technique. What does that mean to you? Communicate with people. Don't be afraid to ride a unicorn every once in a while and talk about stupid things. I have 10 minutes to convince you. I don't even know what my time is. We're probably, am I way ahead or way behind? I'm way ahead. Okay, so what changed in my life to give me these perspectives and things like that? And a lot of it, to me personally, this doesn't apply to everybody, is just listening to like Audible. I started doing that on my commute years ago. It's been 5, 6 years, and you're like, what? It's been 5, 6 years? And you look at your library, you're like, holy crap, I've read 200, 400, I don't even know, because the pages, it's like 15 at a time, and I have like 20 pages or something like that. It's not to brag about how many books I've read. That's really not the point. And sorry for some people, I didn't read it, I listened to it. Some people do get upset about that. But these are the kinds of people who answer questions that I have. So if you're having these questions about what do I do to communicate, how do I apply the ATT&CK framework, don't go into an existential crisis and start blabbering on stage with a wig on, because that's what you'll end up doing. You know, these guys, it's called science, I guess, which is super condescending, sorry. But really, Judea Pearl, if you don't know who Judea Pearl is, anybody know who he is? Show of hands. No? No? Yes? Bayesian networks. Just Googled it. Okay, cool. I mean, like, hey, I got my PhD, and that was me. My other PhD is from Stack Overflow. So Judea Pearl is an awesome guy. He coined, or is credited with coining the term Bayesian network. So when he writes a book, I read it, you know, to see what the guy's doing. He's a Holocaust survivor, still doing this stuff at like 90 or something. I'll be in the farm by then. So Bayes versus Fisher. I often have looked at heat maps and charts and metrics, and I'm like, why don't I like this? Well, people have had this argument. Look at the history of tobacco, big tobacco arguments, and how that whole thing in the United States, sorry, I have an international audience, Sir Ronald Fisher, I'm not dogging him, he's a genius, or was, but, you know, Reverend Thomas Bayes goes back to the 1600s. Google me on quick, please. No. Jordan Ellenberg, also fantastic book. So what is my point? My point is, like, seek perspective outside of just our niche industry. People like to say InfoSec, cybersecurity, security. I don't say security, cybersecurity, but really it's information theory. There's mathematics behind these things. I'm not the guy to teach you the math. I'm really not. But maybe if you talk to me about your ideas in a way that it's accessible, then we can come to like a system that works, because the ODA loop thing is real. And if you don't believe me, go through boot camp, and then when you get out, ask people like, what are you willing to do for your country right now? Or train a horse or something like that. Perspective. Got to put yourself in those places.
Please join me in thanking James Lerud.